Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great and that you're following the 3H's of the channel. In this video, I have a collection of encounters with strange entities. If that sounds like something you're interested in, definitely pull up a stump with me and let's get into it. Thank you for watching. You ever have moments when you have to leave a place but don't know why? You know something's there but can't see it. That feeling of true fear, the primal fear that lives in all of us. I was at a friend's house one night. We were playing Halo Reach. We were on a legendary run when the power cut out, a small blackout for this apartment complex. So we decided to just go out to the pool. It was 0100 after all, and after about 2 hours of drinking and chilling in the pool, we decided to go back. The apartment was a wreck. We thought that somebody broke in. We both could feel like we were being watched. We searched everywhere, using our phones for light, but we couldn't find anyone. But the feeling of eyes was all over us the entire time that we scanned his apartment. Eventually, the lights finally came back on, which made us jump a bit, and then we saw something far worse. In the room that we were in, there were scratches all over the walls. It was like an oversized cat took crack and used the entire wall for a scratching post. He took pictures for the police. As he did, we heard a thud in another room. We raced down the hall and kicked the door down. No one was there. It was just another room that had been wrecked. We searched again before calling the police. They came and took our statements and a copy of the pictures. At 0342, we went to sleep. At 0348, the thud came again. We ran back down the hall. I got there first, and in the middle of the room was a slim dark shadow with jade green eyes. When my friend got there, fire came from the shadow's eyes and arms. The room was soon on fire. I ran at this thing, and just as I was about to grab him, he turned to nothing. My friend went for the fire extinguisher as I got out of the room. The fire department showed up soon after, and the police again. We couldn't tell them what we saw because we would look crazier than we already did, and they said that faulty wiring was the cause. But he moved out of that place as soon as he could after this, and into a house that had a dark spot on the carpet that wouldn't go away, but that's a different story. When I was a boy, my mother and I lived with my grandfather, who had a farmhouse in rural Pennsylvania. My grandfather was a handyman who also worked a small blacksmith shop in his old barn. My grandmother had died before I was born, and my father also passed away while serving overseas in the U.S. Army. Beginning in the summer of 1946, we noticed strange howling sounds coming from the woods that surrounded the property. The sounds didn't seem to bother my grandfather, though my mother and I were shaken when it would begin. The sounds continued off and on for about a year, but we never noticed any animals. My grandfather and I would hunt deer and squirrels in the woods during the colder months, but we never saw any unusual signs of activity. One late afternoon in the spring of 1947, I was helping my grandfather in his shop when I noticed something moving around the edge of the woods near an area whereby my grandfather had a few junk cars and other items. It was about 200 feet from our location. I clearly noticed someone or something moving around. I told my grandfather to look. He walked over to the door, and as he looked outside, he lit his pipe, but he said nothing. After a minute or two, he turned around and got back to work. Then I saw the thing move into the woods and disappear. I couldn't judge how big it was, but it reminded me of a magazine picture I had seen with a large ape that was said to inhabit the Asian jungles. Later that evening, I told my mother what I had seen. She was shocked. She knew I wouldn't lie to her, and the howling sounds had been closer lately. I also told her my grandfather's response when I pointed out the creature to him. She immediately stood up and walked into the sitting room in order to ask my grandfather what it was. He started to shake his head and said that he was hoping that we wouldn't see it because he was worried that we would be scared and leave him. After assuring him that we'd never, ever leave him, my mother again insisted that he tell us what this creature was. He looked away, took a deep breath, and said, "It's a dark walker." He said it lived in the woods for many years. He said the native Indians called it a stone spirit, and that they thought it was an evil spirit that would appear to someone who was about to die. The last time that he had seen the dark walker was the night before my grandmother died. My mother was skeptical of the harbinger of death angle, but she sensed that there was something unnatural definitely happening and definitely nearby. The howling continued each night, though we hadn't seen any signs of the dark walker. Then, one warm evening, we were sitting on the back porch. There were a few howls that seemed far away. We were listening to the radio when all at once my grandfather stood up, looked out towards the barn, turned to me, and said, "John, go get my pistol and ammo. Hurry now." I ran into the sitting room and grabbed the .455 Whibley revolver and a handful of bullets from the old steamer trunk. I handed it to him and watched him load the gun. Then he picked up a hatchet and slid it into his pants belt. He then looked to us and said, "Now both of you, get into the house. Now." We went to the kitchen and were looking through the screen door. We watched as my grandfather walked slowly toward the barn. We saw him turn and walk out of sight into the dark. I decided to grab my shotgun and keep it nearby. After a minute or so, we heard 3 gunshots and a blood-curdling scream emanate from the woods near the barn. Then, it suddenly stopped, and there was complete quiet. We were frozen and wondering if we should go look for my grandfather. A few seconds later, we heard him yell, "Stay in the house until I come back." I heard the pickup truck start up. I looked out the storage room window and saw my grandfather drive to the back of the barn and park. Several minutes later, he backed up and drove by the side of the house and then out onto the road. I could see that there was something in the back that was covered with a tarp. It was getting late, so my mother told me to go to bed. The next morning, I came downstairs and sat beside my grandfather, who was reading the newspaper and drinking a cup of coffee. My mother was sitting at the other end of the table, staring at my grandfather. Not long after, she said, "Well, Dad, tell him." My grandfather put the paper down and looked at me. "I killed the dark walker." That was all he said. My mother told me not to tell anyone and that the matter was closed. We were to never talk about it ever again. My grandfather lived another 15 years. My mother stayed with him until his dying day. When I grew older, I moved away and raised a family of my own. I would return and visit home each summer, and I never heard another howl. So I live in the Canadian Maritimes. I have all my life. I live in a kind of remote-ish part of one of these provinces. By remote-ish, I mean it takes about 45 minutes of driving and dodging potholes on a shitty highway to get to anything close to a town. There used to be a gas station about 20 minutes away, but the family moved away a long time ago. And as of the time of me typing this out, I still have awful internet, and rarely do I ever find cell reception. Besides this highway and the swamp that is a few clicks down the road, it's just me and the trees, and of course my dogs out here. The reason that I'm writing all of this out is something happened to me a few years ago. Every now and then it rattles in the back of my brain, and I usually have a little trouble sleeping that night. You might wonder why I live all the way out here by myself, And the short answer is because the property was cheap. I basically got it for a song. The other reason is that I spent most of my life in the city, and I just grew tired of it. Anyway, during the time of this, I had to get up around 5 a.m. to go into the city, which was 2 hours away on a good day. When all this happened, it was during the winter, and if you've ever been, maritime winters can get pretty crazy, and what was forecasted as being flurries can very quickly end up being basically a nor'easter. So, as I said, I have to get up at 5 a.m. to go to work. This day was a Wednesday. For me, this meant it was one day until Thursday, which meant one day until Friday. I get up, I do my morning routine, I give the dogs some pets, I get in my hopefully warm enough car. This was one of those days when the cold hits you that little bit extra, and you feel it in your bones. The workday went unbearably normal, but at about 3 p.m., it began to snow. Lots of people in the office upstairs thought that it was great, and would say, "Everything looks so pretty when it's snowing." For me, I was thinking about how awful the drive home was going to be, especially since I took the car today. By 5, it was already basically dark, and the snow, as you can guess, did not stop at a flurry. Not only that, the biggest issue with living so far out, it might be days before the road is plowed. Every minute that ticked by until 5:30 had me swearing at myself in my head for not taking the truck. But here we are. Surprisingly, for most of the drive back, everything was going smoother than I thought it would. There was good music on the radio, Ozzy's Boneyard if you're wondering, and the highway was good enough to cruise along at a decent speed. When I made the turnoff onto my byroad, the road got significantly worse. But I managed. At some point, I don't even know when, the snow got to be basically a whiteout. I knew I couldn't go any further. Just as I had this thought, my passenger tires hit the snowbank. I was totally stuck. Now this has happened a few times over the years. I was nervous but not scared. I know I basically just had to sit here and wait until the storm calmed before I could just dig myself out. So there I sat, in the dark, with only my radio and the noise of the heater to keep me company. I must have been tired as well, because I dozed off. I woke up to a cold car. I started the car again and looked at the clock. 8 p.m. I thought, shit. It was at this point I also realized that the coffee and whatever I had eaten a few hours ago was really biting me in the ass now. I thought to myself, I'm going to have to shit in the woods again, aren't I? After I waited as long as I could, I realized that the snow had finally calmed down, and I could see tracks where someone else with a truck had driven by. I thought to myself, too bad he didn't stop to get me out of the snowbank. I got out of my car, 3 steps, and I immediately slipped on the road. After swearing, I chuckled to myself and trudged over the snowbank on the side of the road so I could do my business with some kind of privacy. This is where everything goes downhill extremely fast. Something happened to me after I went over the snowbank. I suddenly come to like I was spaced out for a long time. I am significantly farther from the road than I had ever intended, and after checking my phone, 45 minutes had passed. I wasn't cold. I didn't have any snow covering me. My clothes weren't wet. The part that was also very disturbing to me was that I couldn't see my own footprints in the snow. I shone my phone flashlight around. There was nothing. Not like they had been filled with snow. It was like they weren't there. The snow was totally undisturbed, aside from where I was standing. And where I was standing, I was in knee-deep snow, with more underneath me. I began to panic. I was spinning the light around frantically, trying to find my footprints, but there were none. I was trying to find which way I should go. What the hell happened to me? And then I heard something. It wasn't far off. It sounded like the noise a dog makes when it sighs at you. I was already on edge. I thought this was very weird. Generally, even if there ever was a stray dog, it never comes this far out. At first, I only caught a glimpse. A huge, but skinny, but hulking shadow darted away from the flashlight just as the beam touched it. I only saw a leg, an arm, and part of a torso. Now, I've heard scary stories on the internet, a lot of them, and I did not investigate or go toward this thing. I picked a direction that was opposite from that, and I started trying to run. I got 3 steps in before I got a face full of snow. I heard very quiet noises around me that sounded almost like footsteps. I spun my flashlight around again, and once again, only caught a glimpse. Whatever it was that was in the woods with me was fast and seemingly didn't want to be seen or was afraid of the flashlight. In that moment, it occurred to me that I could use this. I would take a few steps and swing the flashlight around, making whatever this thing was jump out of the way of the beam or back off. After what felt like forever, I could eventually hear other noises. As I inched closer, they were the sounds of someone shouting and the sounds of a truck. I followed this noise, making sure to constantly check behind me. Again, each time I got glimpses, but never a full view of whatever the hell was following me or after me. Eventually, I see lights, and I notice that the sounds of sighing and those footsteps have stopped. I keep going with everything I had in me. I was so tired. I climbed the snowbank and fell down the other side onto the road. I could see my car about 50 feet down the road from me. There was a plow driver who had stopped, and another truck was stopped as well. And in case you're confused, by plow driver, I meant a guy who drives a half-ton with a plow in the front of it. I stumbled my way down the road toward them. They put 2 and 2 together and knew that I was the driver of the car. They asked me if I was okay. I was clearly shaken, but I told them that I was now. The driver of the plow truck was skeptical of me saying that I was okay. He said that he had passed this area a couple of times on the way to plowing people's driveways out, and my car was still there stuck in the snow. He asked, why was I out in the woods? I said I got caught in the snow, and I really had to use the bathroom. The mood lightened. He chuckled and said, so you had to shit in the woods and got lost, did you? Happened to me one time. I was out in the deer stand and had chili that morning. Happens to the best of us. He wished us both well and said that he had a job to do that he was late for and drove off. The driver of the other truck asked me if I was really okay. I said I was now. He said that he had gotten there before the plow and saw how my footprints ended after the snowbank, and then told me that my coat was on inside out. He said, weird things happen out here in the woods, especially this far out. The driver said to go home and get some sleep, and then told me that whenever there's a storm like this, he usually just calls in and doesn't risk it. I chuckled, cleaned off my car, switched my coat back on the right way, and we parted ways. When I got home, I was dead tired, and when I took off my clothes, my dogs went crazy over them, sniffing, growling, and whining. I had to put them out in the garage so they'd stop. I called in for the next 2 days. I was exhausted in every sense of the word. When the roads get bad like that now, I just call in. I don't even bother going out. I don't know what was following me or stalking me or why I was afraid of the flashlight, but I also don't ever want to find out. So those encounters were pretty crazy, weren't they? If one of them stuck out to you, let me know which one it was down in the comments. As always, if you have one of your own, or if you would like to donate to the channel, there are links in the description that you can do both of those things there. and also their super thanks here on YouTube. And with all of that, I hope you enjoyed the videos this week, and if you did, please like and subscribe. And yeah, I will see you in the next one. Thank you for pulling up a stump with me. Thank you for watching all the videos this week and just watching the videos in general. It really helps the channel, commenting helps, everything helps. And yeah, I hope you had a good week, a good weekend, and I'll see you Wednesday.